Hello class, today I'm going to be informing you about human trafficking, often known as modern-day slavery. Human trafficking is women, children, and men being sold to another human being for sex, labor, or other criminal acts. Human trafficking is the third largest international crime industry in the world behind drugs and arms. There are an estimated 20 to 30 million people enslaved around the world today, making it the largest number ever in history. There are so many people in the world, often women and children, being forced into this world, and no one even knows what it is, or they're not even talking about it. You yourself might be wondering, what exactly is human trafficking, or who are the victims, and why can't the victims just get away? Well, often victims are branded with tattoos, making them known to belong to another human being, or they are stripped of their identification, like their passports, their driver's license, their state IDs, military IDs. Often, when you go to another country, you need some form of identification to verify who you are and where you belong to. Well, if you have these taken away and you're in a foreign country, you have no idea where to go or how to even get out of there or prove who you are. Anyone can be a victim of human trafficking. 80% of the victims of human trafficking are women, and half of this number are children. These numbers are higher because often women and children are used for sexual acts like prostitution, pornography, and child pornography. Victims can be targeted by the way they look. They can be targeted by job ads, marketing scams, runaway teens. They are often kidnapped victims as well. The National Human Trafficking Hotline receives more calls from Texas than any other state in the United States. 15% of those calls are from the DFW area. When I was doing my research, I noticed that there was more victims from cities with international airports than any other city around the nation, simply because it's easier to traffic someone when there's an international airport nearby, because you can steal someone, send them across to a different country, and take their IDs, passports when they get there, and they're forced to be there. They have no way to come home. Over 80% of the people who are victims of trafficking are being forced into sexual acts, like sex trafficking. Let me explain what sex trafficking is and who are the victims. Often, the victims can be women and children, and they can be forced into prostitution, pornography, and child pornography. Many of the victims who enter the sex trade industry are aged 12 to 14 years old, runaway teens, and young boys, who are often victims of sexual abuse. This doesn't have to be the case, though. If we had more counseling in schools to be aware and know the signs of abuse and sexual abuse, we could get this number even cut in half. If someone was there just to listen to these kids, or notice that they're acting different, or they're showing signs of sexual abuse, if we had this in schools, I believe that we could reduce this number significantly. There's no reason why any teenager should run away from home, and let alone be forced to go into a sex trade industry that they don't even know exists. A lot of the time now, there are sex trafficking rings where there's a group of people, usually being controlled by a man or woman, or both, and they have people who work for them who lure the victims in and bring all the victims to this ring, and it forms from there. The children that get involved in the sex trade industry, unfortunately, are usually sold to the industry by their parents or other family members. Often, children can be sold by their parents if they are entering a different country, usually if they're foreigners and they need extra money, or they have too many kids and they have to get rid of one. Often the children are forced to do child pornography, which can be found on the internet, on the dark web, which isn't known to you and me, but it's deeply encrypted on the internet, and child pornography is becoming more popular every day. It can also be sent through email and regular mail, but this can be easily tracked, whereas on the dark web, there is more of a difficult process to find the IPs and find out where the location of these people are. Human trafficking victims are forced into sex slavery, but they're also forced into labor trafficking, where they're forced to work against their will. Labor trafficking isn't as popular as the sex trade industry, but over 20% of human trafficking victims are forced to work against their will for little to no pay. Labor trafficking victims are often threatened with violence, with lies, and death to work against their will for little to no pay, and they can be found working as domestic servants, farm workers, factory workers, and even at nail salons and massage parlors. People can be brought to the U.S., but often be forced to work by the people who brought them here, and often they are stripped of their identification, so they can't get work visas, or they have no idea to prove who they are to anyone, so they are forced to work with the people who brought them here, and either get little pay or no pay at all. Have you ever seen the signs on the side of the road that say, "Need a job? Call Susan for $17 an hour, call her at," and it gives you a number? Well, these signs have been connected with human trafficking, and these are the kinds of signs that people get caught up. They see the signs, they call the number, and they can get caught up in a world that they didn't even know existed, simply by just seeing the sign on the road. Now, the human trafficking number is 1-888-373-7888. If you see any signs of human trafficking, like prostitution, anyone who looks like they are being held against their will, call the human trafficking hotline number, and they can try to save these victims. Now, human trafficking can go unnoticed, but if people knew the signs of what to look for and how to report it, and more people can be saved simply by just someone else reporting it just because something seemed sketchy to them. Now, if we had more counseling in schools today, I certainly believe that this number can be reduced simply from runaway teens, the amount of runaway teens that are caught up in the sex trade industry. If we counseled these teenagers and gave them the help they needed and gave them a safe place to be themselves and to explain the things that have happened to them, they could get help, or they can get involved in a family who doesn't treat them like that. They can become a part of a different family, like a foster home, and eventually be adopted. But unfortunately, they believe that the family they're stuck with, and they would rather run away than to be with them. And if we counseled people and to show them the signs of sexual abuse and what to look for, the number of runaway teens involved in human trafficking could significantly be reduced. Simply being aware of job ads on the side of the road, or being aware of the local nail salons and massage parlors, and when you go in them, do the workers seem like they have bruises on their wrists, or they seem unhappy, or that they are overworked and they are exhausted? Well, you could call the human trafficking hotline and give them a tip and let them know that something at that place doesn't seem right. Again, the human trafficking hotline number is 1-888-373-7888.